Well, today's the 2nd of August. July was all about record temperatures and heat waves everywhere. So far, in 2 days of August, we've had torrential downpours of rain, floods up in the north, dams potentially going to burst. There's hardly anybody on the roads in the morning. And the ashes have started. Well, they started very well and then it petered out towards the end, but I suppose it's very, very early days. So I suppose it's time for another one of my in practice blogs. Well, as I say, it's August 2019, and today I want to return to one of my favourite topics, my all-time favourite topics, the tax gap. We all know what the tax gap supposedly is, the difference between the revenue that should be coming in and the revenue that has come in, and we all know that this is almost reached mantra stage with HMRC. All the problems, it seems, that HMRC have are all down to the supposed tax gap and the calculation thereof. Everything that is foisted upon us in terms of MTD and so on is all reduced, apparently designed to reduce the tax gap. And yet the tax gap calculation is ginormous, it's huge, and it's open to such interpretation as to be untrue. I'm indebted, I picked up an article, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, from Andrew Hubbard in Taxation magazine, when he looked at it again, and I want to just reprise what he said in his particular in his article, because it's really interesting and well worth a listen to. Within the article, he pointed out that there is a section, and believe me, there are so many sections in this tax gap calculation. There's a section with this tax gap calculation which is called legal interpretation. And I don't want to get this wrong, this particular part, legal interpretation, people, accounts for apparently about £6.5 billion of the supposed tax gap, or as Andrew puts it, 18% in total. So what is this legal tax? What is this legal interpretation tax gap that HMRC are so concerned about? Well, as Andrew says, it's defined as where the customer and HMRC's interpretation of the law and how it applies to the facts in a particular case result in a different tax outcome, and there is no avoidance. Specifically, this interpretation of legislation, case law, guidelines relating to the application of legislation or case law. So we're looking at, and as Andrew points out, he says, for instance, he says, if HMRC challenges had to go at one of his clients and said, oh, capital allowances on a particular item that Andrew was claiming you can't have, and Andrew says, yes, we can, and Andrew wins the case, he says, is the tax gap therefore increased? If the allowances, as he quite right points out, if the allowances are subsequently found to be correctly claimable and due, then there is no tax gap, is there? Absolutely not. Because obviously, if it's been allowed and it is due, the correct tax will ultimately be paid. There cannot be a tax gap. Yet, there's a difference, isn't there? You have to stop and think about this, don't you, people, and realise this tax gap. As I say, everything HMRC is doing from the beginning of MTD right up until now is all about, oh, it's a tax gap, it's a tax gap. And here we go, is another part of the tax gap that really has been blown apart. And I do like the fact that at the end, Andrew said, I want to read it because it did make me smile. It said, perhaps next year, HMRC could explain in more detail how legal interpretation fits into the tax gap statistics. Well, good luck with that, Andrew. And let's see what happens going forward. But somehow, you know, I think your expectations are a tad high. At the tail end of June, myself and Melanie Lord of AVS VAT, we put on a webinar all about the domestic reverse charge for VAT, and we had well in excess of 1,000 registrants, and it became, and we had an awful lot of questions come through, both on the day and after the webinar, and in fact during the webinar. And it became apparent to me that there was very, very little out there about what this is all, how it's going to affect our clients, our subcontractor clients specifically, obviously if they're VAT registered. So, you know, I sat down with Melanie after the webinar, and we looked at so many questions, and we said we really just can't let this go. So I'm very grateful to Melanie. What she did was she actually put together responses to every single one of the questions raised. Some of them were obviously duplication, so we was able to narrow it down a bit. But Melanie put together answers to every single one of the questions that were raised, and we've put that together in like a big PDF, like an e-magazine, as a very special supplement to our normal ICPA e-magazine called VAT Update. And that magazine is available, that supplement is available for you. So if you're watching this video and you'd like to get a copy, you can. We're more than happy to pass it to you, member or not. All you need to do is email in. If you email me, that's Tony, Tony, at icpa.org.uk. I'll repeat that just in case. Tony, Tony, at icpa.org.uk. Ask for a copy of it, and I'll email the link to it for you so you can have a good read of it. As I say, it's a big old subject, and I think it's going to affect so many of us. Yes, we're going to have a soft landing and all this nonsense, but there's not enough information out there. And whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? That's purely and totally down to HMRC. Now I know that they're a tad busy at the moment with various things, with Brexit, etc., etc. But yet, if you know, they've hardly put any information out there in the domain. When they did put it out, it came out about June, and the thing's coming in on 1st October. Now, if you draw conclusions that HMRC might understand, let's imagine this whole thing was a tax return, and they got, they put this information out so late. What would be the interpretation? Well, I'd think it would be that they didn't have a reasonable excuse. I think there would be penalties flying all over the shop, wouldn't there? HMRC really, I think, have let themselves down on this particular issue. They should have got more information out much sooner. However, this is where we're at the moment with the HMRC that has had so many staff cuts, although not in the area of investigations and inquiries. They've had so many staff cuts, and they've got Brexit agenda, so they're obviously almost buried alive with work just on that particular aspect alone. So we do understand. However, what we're looking for is when and if the shackles are gone from the Brexit agenda and HMRC suddenly have this staff back, we should expect better from HMRC, and we will expect better, won't we, people?